Science, religion, at war for thousands of years.
Each time it's come to a test, it's turned out that science was right.
As science has gotten better and better, God has had less and less to do.
And yet today it may be the merging of faith and technology that brings us closer than ever to solving life's greatest mystery.
Because I'm a religious believer, my science is one way of seeking out the mystery of God.
Proving God. Throughout time, man has endeavored to explain his own existence. And for centuries, the search led to one answer: God. Scientific advances over the last century have raised questions about the existence of a supreme being. But now, faith and science are coming together to try to solve our greatest question: does God exist? While relic hunters and believers look to the Bible to find proof, this researcher believes the key to God could be much closer than we think. His quest for answers has led him to probe the innermost workings of the human mind. Dr. Andrew Newberg, Director of Research of Integrated Medicine at Thomas Jefferson University, studies what happens to the human brain when it contemplates God and the spiritual world.
I think we're at an interesting point where we have an opportunity to bring together science and religion in a way that we've never been able to do before in this nexus of the human brain, which enables us to explore our world scientifically and also to think about things religiously or spiritually.
Using low-radiation brain scans, Newberg is actually able to watch physical changes happen to the brain when a person prays or meditates.
We decided to try to scan people who had been doing a variety of different religious and spiritual practices for many, many years. Our initial work was done with individuals who were very proficient in Tibetan Buddhist meditation. We also scanned a group of nuns who had been engaged in their religious beliefs for over 50 years. And what we did was we used a scanner to be able to take pictures of their brain, and we take a picture of what their brain looks like when they're just at rest, when they're not doing anything in particular, and then we take another picture of their brain when they are deep in their meditation or prayer practice. The areas that seem to be most affected during these practices include a part of the brain called the frontal lobe, which is located right behind the forehead, and this is a part of our brain that normally turns on whenever we focus our mind or focus our attention on something.
In Newberg's scans, the frontal lobe fired up just like it would if the subjects were concentrating on a difficult math problem. Tibetan monks showed increased activity in their visual cortex because they were concentrating on sacred objects.
When we look at the nuns who were doing prayer, we don't see the visual areas lighting up in the brain, but we actually see the verbal areas lighting up. Makes sense because it's prayer. It's a verbal practice.
But the scans also revealed something unexpected.
Another area that we were particularly interested in is an area called the parietal lobe. This is located in the back top part of the brain. What we found that was very interesting in the people who were doing the meditation and the nuns who were doing the prayer is that this area of the brain actually quiets down during these practices.
The parietal lobe is the part of our brain that monitors and reinforces a sense of our immediate physical surroundings. So when Dr. Newberg watched it go dark, he was witnessing his subjects mentally lose track of their surroundings, becoming one with the universe.
The brain is saying, yes, in fact, that you should feel those things because the parietal lobe is going dark and the frontal lobe is lighting up.
We wind up with an experience where the person really does lose themselves and really does lose their ability to perceive space and time in the ways that we normally do.
Are Dr. Newberg's scans proof of God?
If I scan a Franciscan nun who feels that she is in the presence of God, I can tell you what her brain looks like when she feels like she's in the presence of God. The scan does not tell you whether God is in the room with her or not. And what's particularly relevant in the context of the program is that it's in those experiences that people say, I found God. Or they found something that binds our universe together in a way that when we look at our material reality, we don't really see that overall connection.
Newberg's findings suggest that the way a person's brain is wired could determine whether they're a believer or a non-believer. In tests inside his scanner, atheists were asked to contemplate God.
So when we look at the brain of the atheist contemplating God, what we find is that in the frontal lobes, there really isn't very much increase of activity like there is when we look at the Franciscan nuns who are meditating and focusing on God. What we took that to mean in terms of how we interpret that finding is that an atheist really doesn't get the idea.
Non-religious subjects with experience in meditation were asked to put themselves in a trance-like state. The results revealed that their brain activity was markedly different from nuns or monks in a similar yet religious transcendent state.
They really don't want to think about God, or they have trouble thinking about God, and it may be that the frontal lobes just don't turn on because they really can't get at it. They just can't hold it in their mind. They can't focus on it as deeply as someone who is religious or spiritual, because in that circumstance, the person really does get it.
Is getting it a result of faith or the cause? Something hardwired in the brains of the faithful.
Is there a God? Is there not a God? What's the real nature of reality? When we are in a dream, we act as if that is reality. And when we are now in our waking reality, our everyday reality, we say, well, that wasn't real, that was just a dream. When people have profound spiritual or mystical experiences, they do the same kind of thing. They feel that that reality represents a more fundamental reality than our everyday reality.
Does this mean God is all in our heads? Or could the frontal lobe be a channel to a higher power?
Is there something beyond our brain that we don't pick up on the scans, and yet we can find some evidence for somehow? Asking the questions, that to me is really the critical thing, and I don't think you can ever go wrong with asking questions.
While the search for evidence of the Almighty in the human brain continues, others are seeking physical proof of God's presence on Earth. In Ethiopia, Bob Kornuk is hunting one of the most sacred artifacts mentioned in the Bible. The Lost Ark of the Covenant, the golden chest said to carry the 10 Commandments that has been missing for thousands of years. Its recovery and authentication would corroborate vast stretches of the Old Testament and may even be a direct conduit to God. Kornuk has followed a trail of clues down the Nile to its source, Lake Tana.
We're heading across the lake, and we've got about a 3-hour boat ride.
Frequent storms and crocodile-infested waters make this a treacherous passage. If the Ark were carried here by its protectors, the natural defenses of Lake Tana might have deterred any would-be enemies. The remote location would have been an ideal hiding place for the sacred artifact.
This lake is very large, and it pulls some interesting islands on it. It could be pieces of a puzzle that solve the mystery as to where the Ark of the Covenant is, where it went.
More than 30 miles from the shore sits a forbidding isle. A cliff wall, more than 40 feet high, lines the perimeter. A daunting obstacle that could have guarded the Ark from raiders and thieves.
This is Tanakirkos Island. You can see it looks like a fortress. How can someone scale that wall if they wanted to get the Ark and take it?
Tanakirkos is inhabited by monks who are wary of outsiders. They guard a cache of rare artifacts that could prove the Ark was hidden on the island for 800 years. Some of these treasures have never been seen by outsiders. Determined to get access to the artifacts, Kornuk has visited the island before, working to gain the monks' trust.
This is Abba Gabriel. He's a very good friend of mine. He's considered to be a holy man and revered by thousands of people. We'll see his village, and we'll see artifacts that could be connected in a very unique way to the actual Ark of the Covenant.
The relics are secured in a lockdown bunker.
We're here in front of a door behind which houses treasures, crowns from kings. Implements, they say, were brought here from Jerusalem with the Ark of the Covenant. God's presence is literally in these objects.
These fragile implements are said to be artifacts of the blood ritual, committed in the presence of the Ark, as an offering to God. Kornuk is allowed to examine one crucial relic, the Gomer, an ancient basin said to be used to hold the blood of the sacrificial animal.
I'm told that they put blood in this. They stirred it so it would not coagulate and used this to sprinkle on the people to give them forgiveness. They sprinkled this on the Ark of the Covenant.
The monks of Tanakirkos will not allow the artifacts to be removed from the island, making scientific authentication difficult. But Kornuk believes the objects match the Bible's description of the tools used in ritual sacrifice. Though not conclusive proof, they do strengthen the case that the Ark traveled this way.
The difficulty is there's not a person that can go in and say, I can say for sure that what you have is from the Bible. These fit very closely with what the Bible has to say, and you could take the words of the Bible and literally laminate them over these objects, and they do fit perfectly. The story just all meshes together, and it all comes together right in this island.
Tanakirkos reveals more clues.
We're standing on this cliff. It's pretty sheer on either side of us going down into the water, and the Abbas are showing me a hole that was carved into the stone. They claim that this is where the actual tent pole sat. There was 4 of them that held a tent, and the tent was the tabernacle, the dwelling of the Ark of the Covenant in the desert. These stones here are the 2 other socket holes that they have actually harvested. They cut them off of the block of granite there, and they brought them in here as mementos of when the Ark of the Covenant rested in the tabernacle.
These discoveries support the theory that the Ark was here on Tanakirkos Island. But while Kornuk searches for proof of God, many of the faithful are appealing to a higher power, looking for help with a more urgent goal, a cure for cancer. Where medicine has failed, this faith healer in Texas may bring salvation. Are these astounding results evidence of the power of prayer or placebo? In the worldwide search for proof of God, neuroscientists are exploring the complex relationship between spirituality and the human brain. Utilizing CAT scans, neuroscientist Dr. Andrew Newberg has observed chemical changes in the brain when a person prays or meditates. Through a series of studies, he has pinpointed the brain's frontal lobe as the epicenter of religious and spiritual experience. Does the brain have the power to heal? Since the earliest days of human history, man has believed in the healing power of prayer. Faith healers have existed for centuries to capitalize on this phenomenon. While many remain skeptical of the practice, the results achieved by some faith healers raise the question of whether something miraculous really is happening. The crowds that clamor to be seen by Dr. Issam Naimi believe they are witnessing God working through the hand of man.
This is just truly only God's blessings and miracles.
Dr. Naimi is a former anesthesiologist turned faith healer.
If I call it faith healer, it means I am the one who is healing. But the reality is the healing does not come from me.
Nemi claims that he is a conduit through which the healing travels.
What I am doing does prove that God exists.
Nemi says the thousands of healings he has initiated over the years are proof that science and faith work in tandem.
I cannot separate God from science itself. When we are treating people, they don't have to know that I'm praying.
Many who come to Dr. Nemi have exhausted the options that traditional medicine can offer.
I have ovarian cancer. I'm really at the end of the line as far as drugs are concerned. I've had 3 surgeries, so I'm hoping for a miracle. I'm praying for a miracle.
While the prognosis sounds bleak, the stories of some of Dr. Nemi's former patients seem to offer hope. Take Kathy Kuwak. Diagnosis: lung cancer.
I'll never forget the moment when Dr. Nemi was praying over my shoulder and then in my sternum chest area, and all of a sudden my lungs just opened up for the very first time in my life, and I took the biggest breath of fresh air that I've ever felt go into my lungs, and I just kept taking these big breaths, and it just opened up. I couldn't believe it.
She came in having the right state of mind. That's why she experienced the healing very fast.
A week after visiting with Dr. Nemi, scans revealed a stunning development. The tumor was gone. Kathy's oncologist could offer no medical explanation.
He says, I never get to tell my patients this. He goes, it's gone. It's totally gone. He says, Kathy, you were blessed with a miracle. Don't let anyone tell you differently.
Kuwak had seemingly experienced a miracle. But was this life-sparing phenomenon an example of God's mercy, or the placebo effect triggering the brain to heal the body all by itself?
When people engage in very profound spiritual states and deep rituals, their body and their brain change, and it changes the way perhaps their immune system functions. It changes the way in which their brain and body react to different things. So a lot of scientists look at the placebo effect as something that's false. But really, it's a very powerful way in which our brain works and can change the way our body functions.
It is still beyond the power of science to determine whether Kathy's cure was delivered by the grace of God or the grace of her God gene. But whether the dramatic results of faith healing are proof of God or merely proof of the power of placebo, the search for scientific evidence of a higher power continues. For centuries, experts around the world have hunted lost religious artifacts, looking for evidence that could prove passages of the Bible and ultimately, God. On the trail of the lost Ark of the Covenant, Bob Cornuke has come to northern Ethiopia to examine an important piece of evidence linking the Ark to the island of Tanakirkos. This is the first time Cornuke has been permitted to view the document. It is a crumbling ancient text.
This book here is 1,700 years old. You can see the patina on it also. It's animal skins.
The book features one surprising image that could confirm Cornuke's theory that the Ark of the Covenant traveled this way.
As I was scanning the book, I found this very unique picture. We see Mary and Jesus coming to the island of Tanakirkos. Why would Jesus come to this island? Scholars are just going to have intellectual whiplash. But think about it. When he was 12 years old, he returned to Jerusalem after being in exile in Egypt. The first place he went to was the temple. He told his parents, he says, where did you expect me to be? Here we have him coming to this island. This is where the portable temple would be, the tabernacle that held the Ark of the Covenant. And we have written record, 1,700 years old.
Passed down for generations, the oral history of Tanakirkos supports the account in the ancient text.
Jesus Christ was here, you believe.
3 months and 10 days.
3 months and 10 days. And these books talk about that.
Before Saint Mary, Jesus,
before Saint Mary, Jesus, the picture,
and history.
History.
Yeah, talks.
This ancient image could be an epic discovery. If Jesus traveled to this remote island, it could be a sign that something vitally important rested here. As Cornuc gets one step closer to the Ark, other researchers continue their search for proof of God inside the human brain. Over the last 50 years, scientists have joined in one of humanity's greatest quests, the search for proof of God. Cosmologists are looking for clues in the origins of the universe and the Big Bang. Using recent breakthroughs in technology, neuroscientists are searching deep within the human brain. They are beginning to explore how our relationship with God may be determined by our brain chemistry. In 1962, a Harvard graduate student attempted a daring trial to study whether substances introduced into the brain alter our perception of God. It was known as the Marsh-Chapel experiment. The goal of the study was to determine whether a hallucinogen introduced into the brain of a devout test subject could create a sensation that they were in the direct presence of God.
It was done at Harvard University back when Timothy Leary was there and before psychedelic drugs were outlawed. And he took a group of divinity students, people who were already believers and on the path of spirituality, and divided them into 2 groups. And one group, he gave psilocybin, very potent hallucinogen.
Psilocybin triggers hallucinations by altering the amount of serotonin released in the frontal lobe, the brain's emotional control center, that is also activated during meditation and prayer.
And the other group, he gave a controlled drug, which would make them feel flushed but didn't cause them to hallucinate. And then they all went to a Good Friday service at the chapel and listened to a sermon by a very, very well-known minister at the Harvard Chapel.
The study subjects who had taken the placebo reported that the service seemed like any other. But many who had been given the hallucinogen described an experience of self-transcendence during the sermon, a sense that they were connecting directly to God.
After that experience, many weeks later, he asked them about their recollections, how vivid it was. And it turned out that the people that had taken the peyote remembered this as a tremendously important, transformative, changing their life type of experience, whereas the ones who had the controlled drug just saw it as another sermon.
For those who took psilocybin, the impact of the experiment was long-lasting. In a follow-up study 20 years later, many of the subjects still viewed the study as a profound, life-altering experience. Some reported feeling they had connected directly with God. The findings of the Marsh-Chapel experiment reinforce the results of the brain scans conducted in Dr. Newberg's lab. Both studies link the frontal lobe to our perception of God and indicate that our spiritual experience can be intensified by fervent prayer, meditation, and even psychoactive drugs. Do these intense experiences induce an illusion that we are connected to a higher power? Or do they trigger a part of the brain designed to be a channel between man and God? Further study of the frontal lobe could be the key to proving God. Half a world away, Bob Cornuc's search for the ultimate proof of God on Earth, the lost Ark of the Covenant, has turned up a trail of evidence leading down the Nile, to the Jewish settlements near Gondar, to Lake Tana, and now, following clues found on Tana Kirkos and in ancient Ethiopian legend, Cornuc arrives at a small town in northern Ethiopia.
It's the end of a long journey for me. And how did it wind up here? I mean, of all places, this old dusty village of Aksum.
Aksum wasn't always a little farming town. 1,500 years ago, it was the vibrant capital city of the Aksumite Empire, a nation-state that dominated trade in North Africa, with power that rivaled Rome. The kings of Aksum enjoyed lavish displays of their wealth and collected treasures from around the ancient world. In the 4th century AD, Aksum's ruler reportedly captured the greatest trophy in the Christian world.
Izana went to Tanakirgos Island, and he got the ark and he brought it here. He brought it to this very place.
Standing on the ruins of a grand church built by Izana, Kornuk sees the proof is right beneath his feet. Stones with 4th century Ethiopian dialect called gaze detailed the theft of the ark and its triumphant arrival here.
We're walking in the foundation stones of the oldest church in sub-Saharan Africa. And it is here that King Izana in the 4th century brought the Ark of the Covenant. I'm told by the monks that actually this is the flooring that remains, the small bit of it that remains of where the Holy of Holies was. This is where the Ark of the Covenant sat for several hundred years.
Archaeological evidence reveals that this was once a grand basilica-style church, a structure fit to hold the sacred artifact.
You can see that at one time this church really had some beautiful motifs by the carvings here. It wasn't just stone blocks, it just wasn't this austere church. This is what's called a baptismal pool. It's probably that or a washing pool where the priests would wash before they went in to see the Ark of the Covenant.
The church was sacked by Muslim invaders in the 16th century. Local history claims the Ark was rescued by its faithful protectors, who hid it until it could be placed in the Church of Our Lady, Mary of Zion. When the church was reconstructed in 1965, it became a fortified cathedral, a hardened bunker built to protect something of great value.
Right there is where the Ethiopians say, and I personally believe, the Ark of the Covenant rests today.
The people of Aksum believe the Ark and the 10 Commandments sit within a highly secured catacomb. A squad of dedicated worshippers is the first line of defense. Volunteers armed with assault weapons keep watch on this compound day and night.
He said, for 6 years, I am the guard of this church. The security of this compound is very tight.
Even if an intruder managed to get past the armed guards, there is another security system within the church.
This is not just a big building with the Holy of Holies in the back. There's actually a sequence of hallways that go through there. It's like a maze.
The corridors are said to be constructed of concrete and very narrow with sharp right angles. Impossible to maneuver while carrying a large object like the Ark of the Covenant. But the Ark's greatest protection may be its own reputation.
The Ethiopians believe that it has great powers. They believe that if you go in the presence of this object and you don't go in with pure motives, that you're going to fall over dead, that you're going to be burned alive. They believe that this Ark has powers beyond anything we can possibly imagine.
Less than a decade ago, 3 monks reportedly snuck into the chamber and stood before the Ark.
1 man died on the spot. 1 man died 2 weeks later. I flew over here right after I heard of the 1 man dying, met with the family, went to the grave, saw it. The 3rd man had very bad vision, and he's still alive today. I don't believe that the Ark has the powers that the Ethiopians claim. I think it does possess a power of the mind. These people have been indoctrinated since they've been born. They can't remember a time that they haven't been told that the Ark has this incredible power.
Only one human being on Earth is regularly allowed into the presence of the Ark. Is this man the key to revealing God's power on Earth? From the chemistry of the human brain to exploration of distant star systems, science is uncovering new evidence in the worldwide search for proof of God. Armed with the latest techniques of scientific analysis, researchers and archaeologists around the globe are hunting the most coveted artifact of the Bible, the Ark of the Covenant. If discovered, it could be evidence of God himself. For Bob Cornuke, the quest of a lifetime has led to a church in rural Ethiopia. He believes that behind these gates sits what could be the most important archaeological find in history, the lost Ark of the Covenant. This cloistered cleric is believed to be the only human on earth permitted in the presence of the Ark. He is known as the Guardian.
The Guardian is the keeper of the Ark. He's never allowed to leave. He lives his entire life trapped within this fence. If the Ark is not there, why would we have all these guardians for hundreds and thousands of years stay in imprisonment?
The Guardian rarely speaks to outsiders, but now, after much negotiating with Aksum elders, Cornuke has gained an introduction. Here, in rare footage, the Guardian speaks to Cornuke through a small gate at the back of the compound.
Is your health good enough to go worship with the Ark? Are you feeling good?
He said, still just, I pray.
Pray.
Yeah, still pray.
After a few short minutes, the Guardian returns to his post. Bob Cornuke is just yards away from what may be the resting place of the Ark. But today, he will get no closer.
I just met with the Guardian, held his hand and looked into his eyes, the same eyes that possibly gaze upon the Ark of the Covenant.
Cornuke hopes that his newfound access to the Guardian and his continuing relationship with the elders of Aksum will someday bring the ultimate payoff, the chance to view the Ark.
The Ark of the Covenant is the gem, the plum of all archaeology. If someone was to come to me right now and say, Bob, you can go behind that curtain and see the Ark of the Covenant, would I do that? I'd jump at the chance. This is the greatest archaeological find in history.
The search for scientific evidence of God stretches from the biggest objects in the universe to the smallest. Grenoble, France, home of a massive laboratory, located over 500 feet underground and spanning the border between two nations. This is the front line in a quest for something that could rival the importance of the Ark of the Covenant in the race to find proof of God. A tiny subatomic fleck called the God particle. Better known to physicists as the Higgs boson, the theoretical God particle may be a missing link. If detected, it could change our entire understanding of the universe and might forever alter the debate about the existence of God.
Particles come in two types. They're basically matter particles and force particles. Force particles can pile on top of each other, and these are what we call bosons.
Many particle physicists theorize that the Higgs boson is the undiscovered particle that gives mass to all matter in the universe.
The Higgs boson is very different than all the other particles that we know. The thing that makes the Higgs boson special is that even in empty space, it's there. It provides a medium through which other particles move. And that's ultimately why particles like electrons or quarks acquire mass. The best analogy is kind of like a medium, like water or molasses or air. As you move through it, it resists a little bit. So you can imagine that if you're zipping through the air, you can go very fast. If you're trying to zip through water or molasses, you are slowed down. So roughly speaking, that's what the Higgs boson does to all the particles of nature.
If they can locate this force particle, it could be a key step in unlocking the mysteries of the Big Bang and the origin of the universe. To study subatomic particles, physicists use particle accelerators. To search for the God particle, researchers built the biggest one in the world. A 17-mile-long oval track known as the Large Hadron Collider, or LHC.
The instruments that we have, the Large Hadron Collider, are essentially the most complicated, precise machines ever built by human beings. We take protons and we accelerate them very, very, very close to the speed of light. To the point where it doesn't really matter what the speed is, what matters is the energy. And so these particles have more than 1,000 times the energy that a proton would just have if we're sitting stationary.
Building up energy as they speed in opposite directions, two beams of protons are put on a collision course. When they smash together, the resulting impact bursts each one into a cascade of even smaller particles, including different kinds of bosons.
The collisions between protons are so energetic that you just get a huge explosion of different particles. The protons themselves have quarks and gluons inside. So what actually happens is that one of the quarks or one of the gluons in one proton smashes into one of the constituent particles in the other proton, and you just see a big shower.
The machinery inside the LHC can detect and measure most types of particles unleashed in these collisions. And if scientists are able to find this elusive particle, it's a game changer. Its discovery could lead to a so-called theory of everything that could explain the very moment of creation.
If we play the movie backwards, if we go backward in time, the theory of everything would help us explain the Big Bang, help us understand what happened at that moment.
Researchers around the world are pushing the boundaries of our scientific knowledge, opening a new frontier in mankind's epic quest to find proof of God. That quest has led physicists to build the largest piece of scientific machinery in the history of mankind, the Large Hadron Collider. The LHC smashes beams of subatomic particles at energies approaching those found just moments after the Big Bang. These collisions allow scientists to probe the tiniest building blocks of matter and energy.
Because Einstein says that E equals mc squared, energy is proportional to mass. If you want to make heavier particles, you need more energy, which means you need to build bigger and bigger machines.
The goal, find the elusive Higgs boson, better known as the God particle. Its discovery could prove the Standard Model, a theory that sums up our knowledge of quantum mechanics, electromagnetism, and particle physics.
Finding the Higgs boson would actually be a triumph of human imagination. It's the last ingredient in the Standard Model of particle physics, the last piece of the puzzle.
But the Standard Model alone cannot give us a complete understanding of nature.
The Standard Model doesn't account for gravity, which we all know exists. So we're not only looking for the Higgs boson at the LHC, we're looking for all sorts of things. One thing physicists would love to find is a theory of everything, a TOE. The Standard Model is so good at the forces that we know about, electromagnetism, the nuclear forces. If we could just fit gravity into there, we might have everything that there is in the universe.
Scientists hope that the God particle could be a stepping stone to the theory of everything, a single equation that describes all nature's fundamental forces. Gravity, responsible for the evolution of stars and galaxies. The nuclear forces, responsible for binding together all matter. And the electromagnetic force, responsible for light, chemical interactions, and life itself.
The real implication of the theory of everything is that there might be a theory of everything. In other words, there might be a short set of rules, the laws of nature, that simply account for everything that happens in the entire history of the universe. There's never any deviation from those laws. There's nothing separate from those laws. There's nothing over and above them.
Discovering this theory could be essential to our understanding of how the universe began.
One of the things that a theory of everything needs to do is to put gravity together with quantum mechanics. And that's what you need to understand the Big Bang. The Big Bang was a moment when there were particles around, so quantum mechanics is important, but the universe was expanding at a tremendous rate, so gravity was important. The theory of everything would help us understand what happened at that moment.
If a theory of everything can help explain the creation of the universe, can it also help explain its creator?
If you knew a theory of everything, if you thought you knew all the laws of physics, you could certainly then ask, is that it? Or is it a good explanation to say that, well, this is the theory of everything because some higher intelligence made it that way?
For some, the answer is no. With the theory of everything, science would replace God as the answer for any question about the universe. But to others, the theory of everything is in itself evidence of God, his blueprint for a fine-tuned universe.
In the expansion of the universe, one can see some architecture, some ordering. Energy that becomes matter has within itself this amazing capacity to become ordered and to be life-giving.
Einstein used religious language all the time. He didn't believe in a conscious God that was separate from the physical world. But he thought of the fundamental laws of physics as God's thoughts.
Researchers at the LHC have conducted several tests, but so far have been unsuccessful in their attempts to detect the God particle. But with or without the God particle, the search for evidence of God will continue, from the tiniest particles to the farthest edges of the universe. From the Ark of the Covenant to God's blueprint for the universe, the search for proof of God is a work in progress.
Can science prove God? Not right now. But I think the only way that we are going to prove God or not is not only through science, but by a religious and spiritual perspective, as well as from an empirical scientific perspective.
But the search itself, the quest for quantifiable proof of a creator, is a defining facet of the human experience.
I mean, it may be the most important question. It may be the most important question of life. Is there a God? Because that will change the way you live. And so you then look for proof of this.
Is this the location where science will finally unlock proof of God? Or this? The next great step toward our understanding of a higher power, if one exists, could come anywhere at any time. But even as science pushes further toward proving or disproving God, some would ask, how much do we really want to know?
The God of the gaps, the God that explains the unexplainable, has gotten smaller and smaller and smaller. What do you choose to believe? Do you choose to believe that this material world is all there is and science can explain it all? Fine.
It's a dilemma that confronts even the most pragmatic of scientists.
I don't think that science by itself gives us purpose and meaning. It doesn't tell us what is right and what is wrong. But if we want to know what is right and what is wrong, it's important to base that discussion on the real world. And if the real world doesn't have God in it, then purpose and meaning have to come from somewhere else.
Yet as the search for God advances, it inspires scholars and scientists who view their work as narrowing the divide that still separates faith from fact.
And so I would say people who look at the world just as a scientist are like people looking through one eye, like a telescope. If you look through the eye of faith as well, that's like looking through two eyes, and you get a much broader, richer view of the world, a more three-dimensional view of the world.